Hey everyone, what we're going to do today in this tutorial is code a many-to-many relationship front-end web application. And so what I mean by that is we're actually coding the front end. We're building the web application to support a many-to-many relationship in the database. And so in our example, we have created this UML diagram with products and ingredients. And so to kind of give a glance at this, our products are going to be our menu items. And so here's 3 products, and you could see that we can do CRUD operations. So we can create new menu items, we can edit menu items, and we can delete menu items. So if I kind of demonstrate what we're going to create here, as we can create new entrees, and what that does for us is a product has many ingredients, as well as an ingredient can have many products. So if I kind of go here and I look at my tortillas, we can see the tortillas are now in 4 of our products. So you kind of have CRUD operations on both ingredients and menu items. We can create new menu items, again following this UML. So there is a little bit of prerequisites to doing this. You will need to either follow in the card, I'll link a card right now, or a prior part of this video. You will have needed to, number 1, create your UML diagram. Again, all in this video series I show how to do that. And you're going to have used Entity Framework to create your database. In my case, this is Tequila's restaurant database, as well as the tables in that database. These tables support identity in ASP.NET, but here's our ingredients and here are our products, as well as the join table in between. So that's what we're going to work on today. We're going to code out that front end for that many-to-many relationship. Now, where I'm actually wanting to start is by updating my model, because if we look at our product, there's a couple of things that I want to change about my product here off the top. The first thing is that there's not really a path to store the URL of the image, and so I want a string here to kind of store in the database the URL of the image. But also there is a property that I'm going to have that'll allow me to kind of tie in the control on the front end. That's kind of that choose your image control to a property on the back end. So here, what I'm bringing in here, and I'll just kind of highlight what I brought in, are those 2 properties. Again, the URL, which is a string, which will allow me to save the path in the database, as well as a iForm file. So this is an interface type, and this is actually going to be the property that links to the front end, to the control on the front end. And you're noticing here I'm not mapping this image file in the database, but I am mapping the image URL to the database. So for that reason, I'm going to have to update my my migration to include that image URL in the path, or in the database table, excuse me. A couple more things I want to do here is that these categories, right? So these are called navigation properties. So this is a navigation. This is called a skip navigation property, but nonetheless, as I've coded this out, these cause some unintended validation errors. So it is pretty common to mark these navigation properties with validate never. And to get that happy, you have to spell it correctly, and you have to bring in this using statement. So I'm going to mark all 3 of these with validate never. Now this isn't actually going to change anything to our database design. That's just more helping us on the front end. And so those are the changes to the model before I got working on the front end that I wanted to make. Again, a property for the image path, because I thought we should have images, and some validation attributes on those navigation properties. Actually, now that I think about it, on the ingredient side, there's also this skip navigation property here. We're going to mark with validate never as well. Let's go ahead and add a migration for added image URL. To get that supported in our database tables. And I want to take a look. So we're adding a column image URL, and I kind of have some dummy values here for the placeholders. I will update that so you can kind of see that all of my data will have a default URL that we're not going to wind up using. So that migration looks good. Let's update the database with that migration. And then I'll glance at the data, close that, close that, close that, refresh our database, tables, and if I go into my products, view the data, we now have that image URL with the placeholder, so looking good there. So the next step is to start, working towards doing these CRUD operations on our many-to-many relationship. And often, it's pretty easy to take the database logic and put them inside your controllers. And so, kind of historically, if you've followed a lot of my videos, I'm taking entity framework logic, like calling the get something by its ID, or save changes to like an updated entity. I'm taking database logic and I'm putting it in a controller, and generally speaking, that's considered a bad practice. They even go as far as calling controllers with database logic in them fat controllers, right? To in that derogatory sense that you don't want fat controllers. So you want to take that database logic and kind of bring that out. Now, there's really two patterns that I've been exposed to. One called a services pattern, and another called a repository pattern. And in either way, these are meant, these different design patterns are meant to kind of get that database logic out of the controllers and into its own files, right? Separate out the concerns. Controllers are meant to handle requests between the database and the front end. Controllers aren't meant to have that database logic in them. That's more meant for a different tier. And so where I've landed, I kind of like the repository pattern. So we're going to use the repository pattern today, and that's kind of where I want to head next. And so the way to start with the repository pattern is by making an interface. So let's, in our models, and I'm going to wind up with a lot of different models. I could probably use some organization. I'm going to make this interface, and it's going to be called iRepository.cs. And so what you do, really all you do on the interface is you define the method signatures for the class that implements the interface. So all we're doing here is defining method headers for method headers for the class that implements the interface. Now I need to bring in a because these are asynchronous tasks, so we're going to be writing asynchronous code that uses generics. I believe I need to add a using statement up at the top to make this happy. And actually here, because iRepository is a generic, where T is a class. Okay, so that makes T happy because you're passing the type into the repository. So like you can have a list of strings or a list of ints or a list of doubles. Like you're passing the type in. That's what generic type T represents, and we're specifying T as a class. It does say one of our method headers doesn't recognize the query options. So we are going to generate a class called query options. Generate query options here. So that should generate my query options class. Now, this is a class that accepts link query options like the where clause and the order by clause. And so we can actually code that next. If I show these query options, and so here we've got some link. We're going to be able to pass link expressions into our query options. If you haven't seen this before, it's okay. It'll make sense as we start to use this query options class. I will admit it was confusing the first time I started passing link queries around, as that's kind of strange the first time you see it, no doubt. So we've got, some properties here like an order by property and a where property and an includes property. And so these are all parts of a link query. And then we have a method here that allows us to return an array of our string includes. So in link, where are we using includes? We're using includes when an entity has a child entity as part of it. So for example, our ingredients include product ingredients. And so it's kind of like a sub-entity within. It's an aggregation relationship is what you call it, but it's a has a relationship when one entity has another entity. That's where you use includes. And again, here you kind of see some other properties to determine whether there's a where or an order by clause. Now this is templated code, so when you're kind of defining your query options class, it's like the same thing almost every time. Every time I've coded it, it's been the same thing. Whereas this repository here, again, getting all asynchronously is a method header, getting something by its ID, and passing in, some query options, mainly for the includes. The main thing here is when we're getting an element by its ID, we wanted to include any of those child options that it had in it, or I say child, but it's not inheritance, it's aggregation. When we're adding something asynchronously, adding an entity asynchronously, again, you can add a product or you can add an ingredient. We can update something asynchronously or delete something asynchronous. That's the repository. Now let's actually build the class, the repository class. So all of this is being done to kind of get that database logic out of our controllers, but it offers some nice flexibility here. So here's public class repository implements iRepository, and we're going to do control dot. Let's see, we might need to add a using statement. Okay, it does recognize iRepository, so now control dot. I don't need to generate. Sometimes it has to catch up here. it's already using this namespace, so it's recognized type. Oh, bear with me while I troubleshoot this, because I should just be able to implement the interface with control dot. It's not implementing. Generate interface, generate new type, da 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 da. I see my mistake. I keep forgetting about my generic. There we go. Now we can implement the interface, which brings in our methods. Okay, even though our methods aren't coded out, this is where we're going to actually add an entity to our database, delete an entity to our database, so on and so forth. Now let's bring in a couple properties here to our repository, and I'll explain these. Now we need to bring in our context. Okay, so just as we did before, we're going to use dependency injection to pass in our context file to kind of link to our database. Now our context file is called application DB context. So that's going to be our type here, application DB context. And I'm going to call it underscore context, and we'll put a get set block on it. Get set. Okay. Now we also need to say what table we're working with. The table is going to be passed in as our type. So private DB set. Okay, type T. So in our constructor, we need to initialize those two things. So here's our public repository, and we initialize our context, underscore context, and our table, which is DB set. So context is going to use to actually make the connection to the database, and then we're going to specify our table with DB set equals context set type T. So this is going to kind of say, hey, we're working with the table of products, or we're working with the table of ingredients in this example. And so let's just, just to get this actually flushed out and working something in the front end, let's get our first operation, which is get all. All right, we're going to get all of our, products, or get all of our ingredients. And so the code for the get all is a very simple. Now I'm going to make this an async method, and we're going to return await get your table and return the toList async. So that's get all async method. And so, I'm going to kind of start with maybe products or ingredients. We can get all of our products, get all of our ingredients, which means we need to make a couple of controllers. Let's go ahead and add, let's just do ingredient first, and we'll call this an ingredient controller. Okay, it's capital I, capital C, and it's singular, not plural. Ingredient controller. And what we'll do here is now we get to use our repository pattern. So I'll say private repository. It's a repository of ingredient. And I'll call it ingredients. And in our constructor, we can initialize our instance field. So here we're passing in some a repository of ingredients and initializing our ingredients here on line 8. So sometimes you'll see, the same identifier where you have to use the this dot notation So you can distinguish the difference between line 8 ingredients and line 10 ingredients. One is an instance field and one is a parameter. Coded this incorrectly. I need to fix this. This is application DB context, called context. And now we can say ingredients equals a new repository of ingredients using that context. So that ties the repository into the application DB context. So now I've got that wired up correctly. Now again, this instance field now has the ability to call that method that we defined down here, which again, this is the database logic that we're kind of extracting out of the controller into another file, in this case the repository file. And this is a really simple line of code to extract out. Some of these other methods won't be so short, and so in this case we're just really extracting one line, so it's not that beneficial. But as the logic becomes more complex and you're doing more than simple CRUD, there can be a lot of database logic that you need to take out of the controller. So in our index method of our ingredient controller, let's just return, we're going to change this up to be an async method. Therefore, it needs to return a type of task, iActionResult, and we're going to await our ingredients. Get all async is a method that we wrote. Okay, so this should allow us to use our repository pattern to get all of our ingredients in an asynchronous manner. And for testing purposes, I'm just going to change up my default controller to be my ingredient controller, so that when I launch this, it goes there first, so I don't have to navigate there manually every time. So let's see what breaks, because certainly there was a lot of code out there that could have broke something. And of course I don't have the view, right? So that's good that it's at least returning the ingredients to the view. And so let's code that out, right? We have to, of course, have a place for that data to go. Once the controller gets the data out of the database and sends it to a view, let's go ahead and add a folder. This is MVC, so we need an ingredient folder. And because it's the index method, we need an index view. So let's create an empty index view. And our index view should have a model of a list of ingredients. So anything that implements IEnumerable, including a list, will be acceptable. And let's just always rebuild and apply. So let's say H1, whoops, it's trying to build here. Okay, well, we're now landing, it's no longer crashing, but let's actually list out some of our ingredients. So a little H1 that says ingredients, we'll do a little view bag title list of. Okay, so here's our H1. And you know, you could put these in a table, which is what I've done, in a Bootstrap class of table. And the table has a T head as well as a T body. And in that T head, we're going to loop through no loop here. So if we think of this, our first row inside of our table is going to say the ingredient's name. So model.name, that's the ingredient's name, and that's going to have an empty cell. And then in the T body, we're going to loop through, so another TR. Actually, here, let me, I'm just going to code this. Okay. So I need a loop for each, because again, we have a list of ingredients. So for each ingredient I, so we're looping through in our model. Let's do a table row. And again, display the model name. Close the table data, and let's just save that for now, since we don't have any other operations going. Voila. And so we're pulling out of our ingredients table, and we're seeing beef, chicken, fish, tortilla, lettuce, and tomato as our ingredients. And so we are well on our way to building that front end. So where I want to take this next is probably the most interesting of the operations, because what I want to set up is I want to say, hey, you know, if these ingredients belong to many dishes or many products, entrees, whatever you want to call it, in our case we call it products, you know, I want a details page so that I can click on this tortilla and see what entrees it belongs to. And so again, you got that many-to-many relationship. So this is kind of the unique part of this tutorial, is like seeing, okay, well, what are the many dishes that a tortilla belongs to, or chicken belongs to, or beef, or what have you. And so for that, I want to create a details operation. So inside of my table row, I'm going to make another cell here, another table data, and I'm just going to jump right to the details action. Now this is, you know, an action inside of a controller that we have not coded that method yet. We are going to need to pass the route ID as the ingredient ID. So we need to pass that ingredient ID along to the details method. And implement that details. So kind of going back to our ingredient controller, we need a method, which of course is going to be public async. It's going to return a task, action result, called details. And we're close, but this is not exactly what I need. So here we're passing the ID into the details method. So number one, I want to make sure that this breakpoint, that this details method is being called correctly. And so the first thing I'm going to add to this is if the So this ingredient obviously needs to include all of the products that it's associated with. That's where this query options comes into play, and my Copilot was pretty close, but I need to pass into my query options the includes, which I've talked about, the include statement. So I need my ingredient to include the product ingredients, the join table, the product that it's associated with. And let's just, I do want to put in a breakpoint, but maybe we'll go ahead and put the details view together, just to see if by chance I'm not making any mistakes here. So under ingredient, let's add a view. Again, this is details, plural. And this takes in a ingredient. So the model is an ingredient, and ingredient details. Let's just see if I can actually hit that page. Let's put a ingredient details, and I'll even add model name details. See if we get that far. See if we get the ingredient sent correctly to the view. So now, okay, this method or operation not implemented, get by ID async. So let's see if we can get a breakpoint in here, because I figured something would be breaking with the amount of code that was put. So let's put a breakpoint right here on the details. Start with debugging. See if that ID gets passed in correctly. And so details. Okay, the ID is being passed in correctly, so this is in the ingredient controller. Get by ID async. Let's see if I step into that. Okay, order by. Okay, there we go. We got our finished writing our get by ID async, because get by ID async was never written in our repository. And so get by ID async, like I said, a little bit more logic on this one, because we're dealing with these query options. And so as I code this out line by line, we got to say what type we're querying. So we're saying, hey, our query is going to be a type of ingredient for this example. And then here we append the where clause. If a where clause is passed in with our query options, we update our query with the where clause. Same thing with the order by. If there's an order by, then append it. We're going to, the way these this includes work is it's a string array. So you have to loop through your string array of includes and append each include. So you can include multiple, and I will in this tutorial, we will include multiple, I keep wanting to say child, but they're sub elements. And so we're looping through our array and appending those to our query. These next two variables that I'm going to create are going to be used in our return statement. And so this was a little bit of more complex code, but basically we need to get the primary key name of the model. So if it's an ingredient, we need the ingredient ID. You know, if it's a product, we need it to say product ID. And so you can see here there's a key that gets the primary key, and then set the name to the .name property that allows us to, now this needs to be an async method, which is why that's barking, return or query first our default, where again the primary key name, which is going to be well, maybe we'll put a breakpoint right here so we can examine the primary key name equals the ID that's passed in. Okay, so a little bit more complex. Get by ID, again, it's because of this query options, we're passing in link queries that we had to support that. And because I use this get by ID on different tables, we kind of had to find out like what's the primary key name of that table and then return that in there. So let's hit this debug and find out where we're currently sitting. If I hit tomato and if we step into this, going into our query options, okay, here we don't have a has where, we don't have an order by, we're looping through our includes. I think there's one includes. Yeah, that's right. So if I hover over this key now, you could see that the primary key is the ingredient ID. And if I hover over primary key, it's able to extract that ingredient ID out of this key. So really ultimately what we're looking for is that string where it says ingredient ID. And so this returns a link query where the ingredient ID, in this case, equals the ID of 6. So that's passed in, so that looks good. Get out of that method and send that ingredient to the view. And that allows us to get it where it says tomato details, and we got the tomato sent to the front end. Beautiful. Let's flush out our details view a little bit more on our tomatoes, on our ingredients. Okay, so we know it's a tomato, and really all I want to see is what products are associated with that tomato. And remember, we included those products with the includes. So I'm going to say if the model has product ingredients, not null, is not null, and basically that there are model product ingredients if there are any. Okay, so it's not null and there's more than one product ingredient. We're going to display the products in a table. And so here is an H4 that says you could say the products that the tomato is in. So here's our table, the product name, the product description, the product price. So our table has those 3 columns. and we're going to loop through our model's product ingredients. Again, that's that join table. So for each product ingredient, display the product's name, the product's description, and the product's price. So we're kind of using this chaining, the product ingredient, product, name, description, and price. And let's just put a, after the here, let's just put it like a div that says back to list, a little link that goes back to the list. So again, I found this interesting because this is really what this is all about, is this many-to-many relationship and an ingredient that is associated with many products. And so now we're able to loop through those products and go to details and see that the tomato is a part of 3 products. But if I go to the chicken, it's just associated with 1 product. Of course, the fish just is how we have this set up, but the tortilla is associated with all 3. The lettuce is associated with all 3, and the tomato is associated with all 3. So again, that was the more interesting of the ingredients. We're going to flush out the add ingredient and the delete ingredient and maybe the edit ingredient. So we got to do the rest of the CRUD operations, and then we get to do the product side of the table relationship, I should say. So I think a quick one that we could wire up would be the create new ingredient. So I don't have cheese, and so I will be adding cheese to my ingredients. Let's start with the ingredient controller, and we need a get method and a post. And so I'm going to say HTTP get, which this is going to wire up to ingredient / create public action result create, and this is just, we're just going to go to the create view. So let's create the create view under the ingredient folder. Let's add a view called create, and let's set it up with a model typo of ingredient, create ingredient, and we need a form here. Form ASP action is create, method is post. And so really all you need is a label for the name, an ingredient name, class of form control. I think we can go ahead and put this in a div class of row. Put this form inside of a row, and then constrain that row to just a few columns. Div class is call medium 4. So this form isn't going all the way across the screen. So when we call submit, it's going to call the post create method. Didn't really mean to boot into that. So let's minimize that. So this is the create method. If I go back to details, I need a link. So let's do an ASP action create. Create new ingredient. So that'll get my create get, right, to return there. Now I need my post. for my create. And this anti-forgery token is a security thing that's very often used, and it's also considered good practice to bind your fields, and so that's why that's passing that in. We're passing in the ingredient from the view into the method. If model is valid, we have to create this add async, redirect home, otherwise redirect home. And let's go to the add async. You can see that add async is not put in. So let's go to add async and put in, we need to basically define our table type. And this needs to be async. So we're saying, hey, we're setting our table type here. Or excuse me, we're adding our entity to our table, add async, and then we're saving the changes. So again, kind of simple database logic on this one. So add the entity to the table, save the changes, entity framework method. Let's go back to the ingredient controller. Let's put a breakpoint in right here. Take the breakpoint off of there. And see if we're hitting our breakpoint with the data that needs to be passed in. I put that in the wrong place? I did. Let me take that breakpoint out. Don't need that breakpoint anymore. If I go to my, let's see, I put this link on the details view. I'm going to take that off of the details view and put it on the index. This is where I want to create a new ingredient. Not on the details page, but on the index page. Breakpoint looks good. Create new ingredient. Simple form. Cheese. Click create. We got to our post. Our ingredient. It's a new ingredient, so it does not have an ID. The database will generate it. The name is cheese. It does not belong to any ingredients. That's an important piece right there. If we didn't validate never, this being null would cause a validation error, and that model state is valid would be false instead of true, so we'd never get into line 38. Now if I kind of step into this, goes into our add async. Our DB set in this case is a type of table, a type of ingredient, and we're adding our entity, which is, so the ingredient table goes in, the entity goes into the ingredient table, save the changes, redirect, and there's our new ingredient on our list. Wonderful. Next operation, I'm going to close details because I don't need details anymore. I can close iRepository. I can close our DB context. Let's make a delete. So we can close our create view. And down here, we can go with delete. ASP route ID is the same. So in our ingredient controller, we need a delete. We can start collapsing these other methods. /ingredient/delete. This is going to be our get method for our delete. And we need to pass in the ID and send that single ingredient that we're going to delete to the delete view. There is no delete view. Now, this get by ID async requires two options. And so we need to also include, just like we did last time, the query options. Whoops. New query options of ingredient along with our includes property. Okay, and we send that forward to the delete view that we need to create. So let's add a view called delete. As a model of ingredient. We could say delete model name ingredient. And an H3 or H4. Are you sure you want to delete this? So I'll just put in H4 at model.name with a form ASP action delete method is post. Now you have to include the ingredient ID here. That's the one thing that's a very common mistake, to forget the input type of hidden here with the value ASP4 ingredient ID. This ingredient ID has to be sent back to the controller from the view. And then a red delete button and a back to list button. Okay, so here's our delete button. We send over the ingredient ID to the controller. The controller receives that ID, calls on the database, gets that ingredient out of the database, returns it to the view. The view says, are you sure you want to delete this? If you click delete, it should hit the post in the controller, and we got to write the post. And you should receive the ingredient from the view, call the delete async from our repository pattern, pass in the ID. Let's write that delete async method. We could change this so it actually receives the actual thing to delete, but in this case we're just receiving the ID. We look the ID up out of the database table, we remove it, we save changes, we mark it as a sync method to get rid of those errors. And let's see what breaks. Ingredient controller. I'm confident enough to watch it break out of debugging mode, but I want to delete the cheese. Are you sure you want to delete cheese? Go back to list, delete, delete, and it works. Looks like I got an extra quotation mark somewhere on that index view. Right there's that extra quote. And all that we have left on our ingredient is edit, and then we get to work on the fun products, which is really what this is more about, is working on that other side, on that other table. But let's go ahead and wire up an edit button. And we're going to edit an ingredient ID. And a lot of times I like to reuse the add operation code and the edit operation code because they're basically the same form. And so I'll make an add edit operation instead of separate add versus edits. I'm going to do that on the products. I did not do that here, but nonetheless, it doesn't hurt to go through these steps. And so we need an edit get inside of our controller. And let's check this out. Get by ID async. Again, we have to include the products. Let's copy all of this. There we go. And send that into the view. So let's make an edit view. That's model. Is an ingredient. And let's set the edit that ingredient. With a form, ASP action, edit, method is post. We hide the ID, we get the ingredient name, and a save button, and a back to list button. Simple enough form, simple enough. Let's see what breaks. Oh, I got to write the actual edit. Let's go to the ingredient controller. Edit. HTTP post, validate anti-forgery token. Check for validation. Update async. Let's write update async. Let's call the update method. Save the changes, mark this async, save and run. Create new ingredient, cheese, edit to cheese, make it plural, make it really plural. Delete it, add it again, go to details. Doesn't belong to any products. That is correct. So there we go. And I chose, you got to think about how the application should work. How do you want to tie in ingredients to the products? Well, maybe on details, I could have a list of products here and I could choose the product that I want to add cheese to. And that's one option. The other option would be the other way around. On the products, choose the ingredients that belong to that product. So, you can go either way with it, whatever makes the most sense for the business. But in this case, I choose the product to add the ingredients to the product. So we've got kind of our CRUD operations going. Really the neat one there is the details operation, we implemented this repository pattern, so it's a little bit different than just straight, CRUD operation. So we got many-to-many, we got a repository pattern. The last thing I'm just going to kind of tweak is close all tabs. I'm just going to change up our nav bar so that we can navigate to, if you want to change up your layout, here's kind of our home index. So I'll say the ingredient controller, and I'll say ingredients on our anchor tag. So now, the landing page is currently our ingredients, but if I'm kind of over here, I can go back to our list. And that way our nav bar will actually be stuff related to our application that we're building. So that's it for ingredients, and we are going to move on to the other side of the relationship, which is products. All right, let's continue working on the other side of our many-to-many relationship with our products, as we're calling them in our models. We're calling them our products, but ultimately what our products is in our tequilas restaurant are our menu items, the items that we are selling in this case are our menu items. And so just to kind of look at the model, our products have an ID, a name, a description, a price, how many are in stock. Each product has a category, and our categories are like entrees and appetizers. We set up our products to have an image with the default kind of placeholder URL. So that'll be unique here with our products, is to set up an actual image, as well as allowing an end user to kind of upload an image for the product. Ultimately, we're going to put this this functionality for like adding new products. We're going to put it into like an admin area. So you have to be an administrator with privileges to add new products and edit products. But for now, we're just going to keep it kind of so that any user can do that. So every product has an image, it has a category, as we already said, a category ID, foreign key property, and this is a navigation property. And these are our menus. These are collections of order items and collection of product ingredients. So that's what a product is. So where do we start? At this point, we already have our model, so let's add a product controller. This will go a little bit faster than the ingredients because we already have the repository pattern set up and all those methods coded. So again, singular product controller inherits from controller, and we will bring in a private repository of product. Now I'm going to have to import the namespace. So let's do control dot, see, there it is, using the models. And then we're going to initialize this in our constructor. Like so. And our products homepage, we're going to make asynchronous. So we got to change this to return a task of iActionResult. And then we can hit our products repository. So we're going to return, we already have the return to the view, await, I should say, products dot get all async. Okay, so this will return our list of products to the view. So we need to create that view. And a lot of our work is going to be done in the HTML in the view. So here's our views. We have a product controller. So of course we need a product folder here. And inside product folder, inside of the views, we're going to create a view. This is going to be called index, which model will be IEnumerable type of product. And our title will say tequilas. I'm just realizing my solution, I misspelled tequilas. Did I spell that right? How do you spell tequila? I don't drink tequila. T-E-Q-U-I. Yeah, I misspelled it. I-L-A. Tequila. Tequila. Q-U-I. Yeah, anyways. Not important that I can't spell tequila. Tequila's menu items. Let's see, why are you not happy? Okay, I took my semicolon off and got it to build, so even though I got my red squiggly here, I think everything's just fine. In fact, what I'll do, after here, I'll just go ahead and do a for each product prod in model. I'm going to do a bootstrap row on the outside, and on the inside I'm going to have a column div class call medium 4. So each product will be in a bootstrap column. And why don't we just put the prod name just to test it in its current state, see if we're reading that data out of the database. And what I'll add is in my shared layout, I'll change this link to the product controller index, and this will say menu items. We'll see if that does compile. Let's see if that crashes. So here's my menu items. Okay, invalid, unable to resolve. Again, the code generation bit me on this one. This line here on my product controller is not a repository. So it's a dependency injection problem, and basically it's saying that, hey, we're not able to inject a repository of products because we didn't set that up in the services in the program CS. And so what we did have set up was our application, our context. And so if I go to data application DB context is what we pass in. Called context. And this is in a different folder. So let's say the data folder, and then we say context. Oops, sorry. This dot products is new repository of product, passing in context there. And now we don't need this dot anymore because that changes that. So just I'm sure if you use these code copilots, you know, they're good for getting things coded fast, but oftentimes they make mistakes as well. We make mistakes, they make mistakes. Okay, now let's try that again. If I close. Okay, beef taco, chicken taco, fish taco. We are getting our products and we're looping through them. And we are hitting our view / product. Gets us there. Let's flush out this view a little better. I bet you if I rebooted Visual Studio, that little squiggly goes away. Nonetheless, what I'm going to do inside of here is I'm going to have, for each product, I'm going to put that product inside of a form. And my form action is going to be delete. Now, of course, I have to code this delete. Of course, it's the product controller, and the method is post. So we're going to be doing, you know, CRUD operations, of which when we post, when we submit the form, it's going to be calling the delete operation. We need to code that out. Now, we always need to store the product ID. It's a good idea. It's easy to store that in a hidden ASP4 at prod.prod ID. And we'll say name is ID. Now that's using the helper tag, the ASP4. Another way of coding the same thing is just putting it in the value. I think both should work, but I'm going to keep it similar to what I did prior. Now, each product I will put in a card. So this is a bootstrap card. And cards have headers and footers and bodies. The first thing in the card, I will go ahead and put the image. Now, if I walk through this image, the image source is URL content. That's how basically how you get into www root. That's where your static files are. So this at URL content, again, kind of puts you in the w root folder. Inside of the w root, we're going into images and then adding the product URL. Well, you can see here there are no images. Let's go ahead and add an images folder. We're going to put some static images in there. We have a class of card image top. There's a little custom CSS that I put in here to make sure all my cards have the same height regardless of the image size. So notice this class of fixed image height. I'm going to put a little CSS in there for that. And then each image has an alt attribute of the product's description. So that's your Bootstrap card. Now, let's go ahead and do this custom CSS. So it's a pretty simple class selector that we're going to put inside of our site CSS. Here's a lot of default template CSS. Here's my custom class, fixed image height, height of 200 pixels. You can modify as needed. Object fit covers, ensures the image covers the area without distortion, and width 100%. So it's the full width and covers the whole space, 200 pixels height. And again, we got some template images right now, some placeholders, I should say. Getting somewhere. Not exactly right. We got /images and then this URL. Well, they're not playing nice together. So the fix for this is I really don't care about this placeholder image. I need to actually get a beef taco, a chicken taco, and a fish taco images in there. So you can go to the internet, find your website that you like to get free images from. I like pexels.com. If you're just using it for educational purposes, you're not going to get in trouble to just go to Google. But let's I've already got some images that I've downloaded. You go to the internet, download your images, and I'm going to put these images that I've downloaded. I'm going to open the images folder in File Explorer and paste these images in. Now, notice they're all lowercase. There's, pretty simple file names, .jpgs. So, these are my initial images. Now all I have to do is change my database to say fish tacos, beef tacos, and chicken tacos as far as the image path. Okay, so putting the images in the wroot images folder, step 1. Step 2, I'm going to go into my database and put some decent seed data that now reflects those image names. So this is Tequila's restaurant database, tables, and my products. And I can view the data. My image URL is now beef tacos, plural, JPG, and just tab off of it. This is chicken tacos, JPG, tab off of it. Fish tacos, JPG, tab off of it. So my image URL has been updated, and that's all you really need to do in your seed data, and that will update the database. You can go right back in and view the data and see that it's been committed to the database. And now as I open this back up, we now have our cards and our images for our products. And again, we're using a Bootstrap row grid system, 3 cards, 3 columns per row. And if we get down to a smaller than medium, we get 1 card. So a medium size devices and smaller, we go down to 1 per card. That's the grid system in Bootstrap. Back to our index, and we are ready for a card body. And I don't want to code all of this at once, but div class is card hyphen body Bootstrap class. And then let's put an H5. Class is card title, so a little Bootstrap styling on that. Where we're going to put the prod name. And the next 3 are going to be in paragraphs with the product description, the product's price converted to a currency, so it's going to have the dollar sign in 2 decimal places, and the quantity in stock, and for now, that's all I'm going to put in my card. Now I'll come back and put more in as we add more operations. But for now, we're just doing kind of a read operation, a read of all the products. Menu items, beef taco, delicious chicken, different prices, different quantities, and we are on our way. Now the next operation to work on is add. I personally like doing the add and edit operations kind of combined because they're similar controls on the front end form. So I often do add edit operations kind of together. It makes the C# just slightly more complicated because you have to account for which operation are you working with, but again, it kind of reduces the code a little bit. So I will come into here and right underneath my heading, I'm going to have an anchor tag with an action called add edit. Of course, it's the product controller, and it will say create new item. And so I need to write this action called add edit, and there's going to be a get operation and a post operation for add edit. And so public, let's just do HTTP get. We'll do the get first. Public, it will be asynchronous. Oops. Public async task iAction result add edit. Now there may be an ID, and if that ID is 0, you're doing an add operation, right? If you're doing an edit operation, your product will have a product ID. So this ID represents the product ID that you'll pass in the route values up in the URL. And so you have to account for that. And we'll say, if the ID is 0, then we're going to set the operation to add, and we're going to return to the view, the add edit view we haven't created yet, a new product. So we're going to pass an empty product to the view. Of course, then we need an else block that also has a return statement. So I'm gonna, at this point, I'll just return view. At that point, to make this compile, I'll come back and edit this. So again, this is more or less your add operation. Else view bag operation is edit. So 2 operations here, one or the other, with an if else block. It's also the case that we are going to, when we're doing an add, if we're doing an add new product, we're going to need to have all the ingredients as well as the categories. So a new product, you're going to need to select the category and you're going to need to select the ingredients. And so you need to send that data into the view as well. In which case it really does make sense, I think, to make a view model at this point for your products, which is an option. The other option, if you don't use a view model, is to just kind of load up the data inside a view bag. So I will do view models here. I will do view models in this tutorial But for now, we'll just use view bag. Now, in order to get the ingredients, we need to have our ingredients table. So we're going to kind of hit the ingredients as such. We're going to initialize ingredients following this same syntax there. That will allow us to hit our ingredients table. Ingredients, and now we're going to have to await this. Await ingredients, get all async. So that puts the ingredients in view bag. Again, that will allow us to select ingredients for our new products. We're going to have to do the same thing for category. Private repository of category. And down here, it's the same kind of deal, view bag categories. Okay, so now we have ingredients. We've got our categories all out of the database. And our operation is add, and we're returning to the view a new product. So let's go into our product folder, and let's add a view. This is going to be called add edit. And this model is a product. And our title I'll do a little interpolation here. We'll put view bag operation. So let's either say add or edit. And let's put a little H1 here. Let's say the view add the okay. So let's see if we can hit this view, the add edit view, with our link that is adding a new product. So here's create new item, and it says add. We don't have a model name. There is no product's name, so it just says add. So let's just say edit menu item, and this will say add or edit menu item. Add menu item, add menu item. Looks good to me. Let's bring in a form that we'll post. Form, ASP action, add edit. Now this part right here, when I say the encoding type is multi-part form data, this part is unique to uploading. Of course, we're going to be doing a post, but along with that, we're also going to be sending along, multiple parts of this form data, including our image. And so this is unique when you're uploading images. And so this was not needed until I added the portion where you can add an image, which again, there's going to be a little bit of unique code in here to support that. And this is how I chose to work with my images. We're going to hide a couple of IDs. So we're going to hide our product ID. Our products also have foreign key of a category ID. So each product should have a category ID. And let's see what this suggests. So we are going to work with our name, and so let's just kind of glance at this code and walk through. Okay, so we've got a form group, a label for the name. No, this is an empty label. A text box with the Bootstrap class of form control and some validation. I'm going to add a couple of attributes here to my input. I'm going to add the name attribute. Now I like adding this name attribute because that's one way of doing model binding and sending data into the controller using this name attribute. Let's just I think that's all you need. Now, you know, the styling for this I might kind of come back and change, because one thing I don't like, these inputs controls end up being 100% width of the container that they're in, which in this case ends up being the entire screen length, you know, the entire page width. So of course you don't love that. You know, just before I start looking through all of these, let's just go menu items, create new. Yeah, there you go. And click on name, label, and it puts it there. Let's go ahead and continue. Now, once you do this once, we got description. So a new product has a name, a description, a price. These are the easy ones. It's the image that is more complex. So you kind of get one and set up and then replicate it a couple more times for each field. So price, the quantity in stock, and I'm going to put the words quantity in stock in my label. That way it's just not using the default database. Right, so quantity in stock. Now my image control, again, the image is the most unique part of this. Div class of form group, and this is label for image upload. And input type of file. Class is form control, Bootstrap class. ID is image upload. Name is image file. And ASP4 image file. So this is that property that we added to our model specifically for the image. Alright, so the next thing to do is we need to allow the user to select the category and the ingredients. And so we're going to have to loop through our categories and loop through our ingredients and get all that on the screen. To do that, we'll start with div class of row, I'm also, just for the sake of not having these go across the entire screen, I'm going to do a div class of I'll tolerate it for now. So here's my div class of row underneath all of my controls. And I'll have two columns, div class of call. That's going to be my categories column, and this will be my ingredients column. So I'm going to loop through my view bag. So inside this one, this is going to be my categories. Now, copy and paste a lot of code here as I walk through it. We're looping through viewBag.categories. And for each category, this is a really interesting chunk of code. We have a div, okay, with a class of form check. That's just a bootstrap class. We write a little Boolean expression here to see, especially on the edit operation, if the product ID, if the category ID is the category ID of the product that came into this view. And so basically this is going to allow us to check, if I kind of highlight that, notice down here, this will allow us to put a checked attribute on the category that our product belongs to. And so again, this little Boolean expression is basically going to come down to true or false. Now you'll notice underneath this, here's our radio button, okay, and they all have the same name, our radio button group, right? If you remember, our name is category ID. So that's how you group radio buttons together, so you can only select one. All of our radio buttons inside this for each have the same category ID. Bootstrap class of the check input. The category ID, of course, and the ID attribute. The value is also the category ID. And again, this little is checked is going to put a check mark in the correct radio button if you're doing an edit operation. Doesn't do much for our add new because there is no checked when you're adding a new product. And here we're just putting category.name next to the input. Okay, so get that all on the screen there. A lot of code in one line, but nonetheless, now we should have radio buttons that read our categories out of the database and put them in radio buttons, and we can only select one. And this choose file is also working. Everything's looking good. We're going to do the same thing, or very similar, for our ingredients, where we're going to loop through our ingredients in the view bag in a for each loop. Now this time we're doing a checkbox. That's really the only difference here. So we're looping through our ingredients, putting a class of form check. Here's our little expression. The is checked is checking to make sure that the product ingredients, because really, we've got to look at that join table. So that join table, the model's product ingredients is not null, to kind of keep that from, crashing if it is null. We don't want to run this code. And if the model's product ingredients has the ingredient ID of the model, again, the model's ingredient ID equal to the ingredients in that loop in viewBag ingredient ID, Again, this is going to allow us to see if we're doing an edit operation, if the ingredient is already associated with the product. So that's kind of a little chunk of code to make this variable called isChecked. And then we can check that variable is checked. If that's true, we say it's, our checkbox is checked. Otherwise, it's not checked. So it's a nice little way of coding that. And again, when we're just doing the add operation, of course, nothing is checked. And we put these in checkboxes, obviously, because you can have multiple ingredients, yet you can only have one category. Now, let's see. Let's go ahead and put a button to save changes. So underneath our row, a submit button. And we'll also put a cancel button. And do button outline dark, just to make that cancel button look. I should assume the product controller, because that's the controller. But sometimes I like being explicit with that. Close the form. Okay, so now this form at least looks like it's ready to do work, but it's not quite ready to do work because we haven't written the post method. So we create a new item, and I'm cool with this. You can style it how you wish. If I hit cancel, it goes back. But this add or edit, and obviously this save doesn't do anything because we haven't coded it. So let's go back to our product controller and write a post method for add edit. Public async task iAction result add edit. We're going to send in the product that is coming from the view. That is a strongly typed model. We're also going to have an array of ingredient IDs. Now, again, this is model binding, so ingredient ID array has to come from our view, and you'll notice that our input checkboxes all have the same name of ingredient IDs. So this is how you pass in an array of ingredient IDs from the view. You give all the checkboxes the same name, and that will allow you to receive that from the view as an array. So that's pretty cool. We're also going to accept our category ID. That comes from our radio button name. So again, kind of going back here, one of these radio buttons will be selected. And now we can start coding the post. First thing to do, model state is valid. Make sure we don't have any validation errors. And then there's some unique code here for the image file. Again, images are always a challenge to work with. I can walk through this code, and so we have a property called image file. What we need to do is figure out your hosting environment. Like basically, it's one thing to do this on localhost, it's another thing as you start deploying it. So your image path might vary. depending on whether you're on localhost or whether you're deploying it to the cloud, etc. So one thing that kind of helps with that dynamic nature of imaging path is you can initialize this web host environment. And so this is a data type that I will bring into my controller. And again, this is built in to ASP.NET Core. And so we kind of bring in the field there, and we're going to initialize it in our controller. Thankfully, we can, yeah, that's exactly right. We need to pass it in with dependency injection. So this kind of comes from the services container, and initialize the field equal to the parameter. Now we can use this underscore web host environment. And so, that basically gets me into wroot, right? And then the images folder. And then this is going to, add what's called a GUID. So the file name will be the product's image file name plus a GUID. So it's going to have like a random string that's going to save a unique file name. That way, if a user uploads two of the same images with the same file name, it doesn't save them the same way. It saves them with a unique ID. And if you've ever done streams and working with local files, you'll be familiar with the file stream class. But here you can kind of see our file path. Of course, this is the path, the full file path, kind of a complete file, including the folder and the file name into the file path. And we're doing a create mode, and this will create that image in the www.root folder in the images, and also set our product image, our URL, to that unique file name. So this kind of saves the image to wroot is what that does. And then this, as we're doing an add new image, we need an image URL that we'll save there. So pretty interesting chunk of code to work with images. Images are always a little bit more, complicated, and certainly this is not perfect, but this is good for our needs. Now the next thing to do is say, hey, if this product does not have an ID, product.product ID is 0, we're basically doing an add operation. And so this is our add operation. Very similar to before, we need to load up our view bag, because where we're going is back to the list, right? So if we're going back to the list of our products, we need to load up the ingredients and the categories in view bag. We're going to set our product's category ID equal to what's passed in from the form. Again, that's kind of here on line 47. We're setting our product's category ID. Obviously, that's required. This is an interesting for each loop. We're looping through our array, and in our products ingredients, we're adding, again, this is very similar to our join table, the ingredient ID to that product. And so since we don't have any ingredients, this basically loops through our ingredients and adds each ingredient to our product's join table. And then here we're calling products add a synced product, and then going back to our list, which is /product controller /index. And let's go ahead and stop the application. Now, not all code paths return a value. So I just need an else block, and I'm just going to just to make it happy. I'm not doing the else block yet, but just to make the compiler happy for now. so that we can test our add edit. We need one more on the outside of this else. Again, just kind of make the compiler happy. We're going to have to finish coding all of this. But we're at a point where we can test the add operation. In fact, I'm going to test this with the breakpoint. So on our post, and let's go menu items, create new item. $100. We got one in stock. It is an entree, and I have a veggie tacos JPEG that I've saved on my computer. So kind of fill it out, make all the fields happy. If I click save, it does hit my breakpoint, which is what I would hope for. Looks like my model state is valid. Looks like there is an image file, so we'll go in here. Uploads folder. Looks like wroot/images. That looks good. My unique file name is veggie tacos with the GUID in front of it, so that looks good. File path is the full path, the folder plus the name. We add the image. Didn't crash, that looks good. Set the URL to just that. We're looking good. Product ID is 0. Load up ingredients. Load up our categories. Set our category ID. We loop through our ingredient IDs, which again, our ingredient IDs is an array of 4 ingredient IDs. 1, 2, 3, looks like 4. One thing I'm realized, I've thought about is like this code a lot of times just kind of works out of the box. It's not going to work for 100% of cases. That's why you need try catches. I don't have a whole lot of try catches going on. Anytime you're working with databases, you should put try catches in. I don't have a try catch there, but it does add the product to the table, to the products table, and saves changes. If I just continue at this point, we can see the veggie taco has been added to our database. If I reload, it should still be there. Beautiful. And then now what's really nice is that our edit operation is already kind of mostly done for us because of the way that we built this add edit method. So the add is working. Again, granted, I'd probably want to test this some more, but just kind of hacking this together. Add a product works. On our index, okay, let's go ahead and put an edit button. And where I'm going to put this edit button is underneath my stock. So here, here's my anchor tag that looks like a button. Product add edit. This time we're sending in a route ID, the product ID. If there is, if we're doing an edit operation, that ID, again, there's an if else, that if there is an ID passed in, then you're doing an edit operation. So this part is necessary to kind of send that product ID via the route parameters. And this little italics tag old HTML tag, HTML4 tag, has a Bootstrap class of Bootstrap icons, BI, pencil, fill. So we need to bring in some Bootstrap icons. So if you go to the Bootstrap, getbootstrap.com, click on icons, click on install. There's a nice little CDN right here that you can bring in for Bootstrap icons. And so you need to go to bring that in, shared, layout, and underneath our site CSS, I'm going to paste the CDN for Bootstrap icons and save that. And these icons are really nice because I like Bootstrap, and you can just kind of search what you're looking for. And I think I searched for like a pencil, and pencil fill is what I landed on. And here's your italics tag with the classes, and then you could just add the word edit. So if I close my layout back to my index, so I just added the word edit to my to the I tag, and now each product should have an edit button. And there we go. Now this takes us to add edit 1, and obviously there's a lot more to kind of code for. So now let's go back to the product controller, and our edit operation is what we need to work on. So we just kind of hit the get block for the edit operation, and that is not coded out. So back on the get, we're gonna kind of need to, this ID will have an ID, so we need to get the product by ID. Product equals await products. Okay, so we are going to include both the ingredients from the product ingredients and the product category. That looks right. And we say where the product ID equals ID. This is a little bit different. I'm going to have to test this. Looks good. The view bag operation is edit, and then we're going to send the product to the view. So basically we've got to hit our database, and using our query options we can include all of the data that we need about the ingredients and the category, and obviously a where clause. Let's hit a breakpoint here and just kind of step through that line. I could test it with or without a breakpoint. Find out either way if it works. Menu. Okay, we're going to edit the veggie taco. And if I step over that, I guess I'm stepping into, nonetheless, step out. Let me step. Okay, so now our product. Yeah, veggie taco. So veggie taco is hit. We got a category ID of 2. And ingredients, product ingredients. Okay, it's not seeing my it's not including my product ingredients. Let's hit continue. Let's see how that view looks. Yeah, it didn't bring my ingredients over. Now, my get by ID async is already handling the ID. So I'm actually going to take this where clause off, because get by ID here already handles this part. Okay, so I'm gonna do a little troubleshooting live, and so sometimes I pause when I troubleshoot, sometimes I don't. And so the edit operation is working, and as demonstrated here, I can edit a beef taco and the ingredients show up. And so it's like, well, wait a minute. I did end up taking out that double, that other filter here, but this is working. It's just for whatever reason my ad didn't work correctly with my product ingredients, and so my veggie taco did not add the ingredient list properly. And so that's kind of where I've landed. The problem is, if I actually look in my database, my veggie taco doesn't have any ingredients. And I was troubleshooting this, and it looked good, that my product ingredients were, in fact, kind of looked like they were going in, but ultimately something didn't work. And so if I, let's just add another veggie taco, and I'm going to continue there. I don't need that, and let's add veggie taco, entree, choose the file, veggie taco, and again I select kind of these bottom four veggie options. I click save. I'm going to choose step over, step over, step over. My ingredient IDs are coming across. So if I step over that, let's product ingredients, add. That way my product has a null product ingredients. And so I think I know what I need to do. When I have a new product, here's what we need to do. So a product should have a list of product ingredients. And so if I go to my model, instead of allowing this to be null, I'm going to go into my constructor, public product, and explicitly product ingredients is a new list of product ingredients. Now that won't be null. It'll be an empty list. And so now we can add something to an empty list. We can't add something to null, but we can add something to an empty list. And so this kind of explicit initialization is what is needed in this case. And if I troubleshoot this one more time, I'm going to run it out of debugging mode. I'm pretty sure that's going to be my fix. So let me go ahead and create a new item. Downloads, veggie tacos, appetizer, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so now if I edit that, now we're working. So that was the troubleshooting needed there. Okay, so now let's cancel. And now the next step is to kind of flush out our logic when we post and edit. So we wrote the logic here for adding a new product, this else block in the product controller, and this is the add, edit, post. This else block is where we are going to write our logic for making changes to a product. Now, first thing I will do is kind of hit the database and pull out the existing product. Now, you know, the product is sent in from the view. And this is a modified product from the view. And so with Entity Framework, this product is not the same product anymore. And so if you just try and make changes to this product, the Entity Framework, kind of the object relational mapping framework that works with this, basically it won't work. And so you actually have to hit the database again in this else block and query get the existing product again out of the database. And so this existing product, we're going to make changes to this existing product, and then when we save changes, this existing product will be viewed as, well, that's the product in the database to save changes to. I made the mistake of just making changes directly to this product, but Entity Framework did not recognize this product passed in from the view as the same product anymore. So this was the fix, was to kind of re-hit the database. Now, we should have an ID at this point, the product ID. So kind of look at the query. We're hitting the database, getting a product by ID, including the product's ingredients, and basically say, hey, if that product doesn't exist, go back to the view, the add edit view, and just send the product back to it if it's empty. But it should exist, right? And then, so what do we do at this point is we update the existing product's name, the existing product's description to be the values passed in from the view. So on the right hand side, that comes from the view, from the end user. On the left hand side, this is the existing product is what we're updating. And then also setting the category ID. Then we're going to update the product's ingredients. So because that's a list, we can clear the list and loop through our ingredient IDs. Again, that was kind of passed in from the view. That's our array. We're going to clear the list and just go ahead and re-add our product ingredients. So this for each loop is the same for each loop that we found here. And here I did throw in a little try catch. At this point, hey, let's try and update. We're updating the existing product instead of product. Catch an exception. Now, this return statement, I can take this return out, and then I don't need this else block. And then I'm just going to return here, return to the index method of the product controller. Okay. Now I will admit that I could update this to allow a user to change the image, and that's not something that this currently allows for, but we can change everything else. And let's check. Now, one thing here is that these view bags, I'm just going to change that, put them out here. Actually, I'll just put that right here so that the view bag's loaded up with those things no matter which path it takes. We got a few different returns, and they pretty much all need the view bag ingredients in the view bag categories. So I'm going to try this without breakpoint. and see what breaks. I'm going to edit my veggie taco, make it plural. That worked. I'm going to change the quantity in stock. That worked. I'm going to get rid of the ingredient cheeses. That worked. I'm going to change it to an entree. That worked. Side dish. That worked. Again, the functionality on the updating the image, I think it could definitely be worked through, that logic, but not the most critical thing. All right, and so we've got add, we've got edit working, and change all these different fields on the edit, the adding working, images working. Last but not least, and this one's getting a little lengthy, so we'll go through this one hopefully kind of quick with the delete operation. So we need a delete button here. Let's close what we don't need. And add edits should be good for now. Product should be good for now. Now, our delete is on this form. So really this form needs a submit button. And I like Bootstrap. Actually, I said do this quickly, but I'm going to explain modals. And so I like using Bootstrap modals for my delete operation. And so a modal is just a little pop-up window that kind of focuses the website on one question. And so if I kind of look up a modal, it's an interesting Bootstrap control. You kind of see the modal demo. You got a title and some text and save and close. But it does, kind of focus this in. And so, this is like, are you sure you want to delete this? And there's really two parts to the modal. There's a button to launch it, and then this part is all hidden, right? When you click the button, then this all becomes visible. Okay, now you have to link the button together with the modal through the ID. So notice the ID of the modal, this hidden piece, is example modal, and the target is example modal with a pound symbol in front of it. So that's how you link the button to the markup, to the div markup. And so what we have is we're going to need a bunch of modals, one modal for every product. And they're all hidden, so you're not going to see the modal until you push it. But every modal needs a unique ID. And so to kind of show you the way I did this, I'll bring in the button first, right? So here's a standard HTML button. Kind of thinking about this, I'm not even sure that I use that, but I basically write a method called getDeleteModalID. So I write a little helper method that, again, on this button, looking at the docs, this is where you need the pound symbol in front of the string, example modal. So I just need a little string concatenation to concatenate a pound symbol in front of like a string, right? So up towards the top of the view, I'm going to write a little helper method, and it's pretty savvy in that this function returns a string. You pass in a product, and it says delete modal, and this will be delete modal 1, delete modal 2, delete modal 3, but that's exactly what delete modal ID is necessary. And then you need the modal itself, and probably you want to go ahead and what I would do is I would copy the modal code. Which one do we want to copy? So really all I'm going to wind up using is like the modal title. Probably one of these top modals. Let's see, header. Yeah, I'm just going to copy the I'll copy this one. Okay, so I'm going to copy this from the Bootstrap docs. And after the button, now, there is a class of modal fade. Okay, so I think I might have used, let me go back to the docs. I must have used this one. Okay, I'm going to use this one. Copy this. So I'm going to delete the modal that I just pasted in, because I used the one with modal fade last time. So let me remove that modal and replace it with this one. Now the ID, I'm going to write another helper method to say get modal ID. Now I don't want get delete modal. I'm just going to say get, I'll just call it get modal ID. Tab index, the area labeled by, that's for screen readers, and the hidden is true. We got the modal content. In the content, we've got a header, a body, and a footer. I'm going to delete this body. And in the title, I'm just going to put the product's name. This is a close button. Let's stop it. Here's our close button. And then the footer, another close button. Change that to say cancel. And this is actually our delete button, and button type of submit. So this button that says delete, that is we'll say danger button, should call our delete action. All that's left is to write get modal ID, so string get modal ID. And this returns the string without the pound symbol. So again, that's going to allow us to have dynamic modal IDs depending on our product IDs. And link all of these buttons together with all of these modals. And we do not have a delete method. If I kind of go back here, there's our get and our posts. Kind of condense all these downs. So before I click the delete button, we have to write that method. But just to glance at it, here's our delete with the Bootstrap icon. I didn't highlight that, but our let me show that code. See, scrolling to the right. Oh, there it was right there. The delete button. Nonetheless, if I click delete, it should say chicken taco, cancel, delete. And maybe I should, are you sure you want to delete fish taco is what that should say. So, are you sure you want to delete product name, question mark. I wonder if I can leave that question mark right next to it. Yeah. Okay, so now, last but not least, let's write this delete method in our product controller. Should be pretty straightforward. Our delete takes in an ID, http post, and we'll try catch here. Delete from our products where the ID, go home, otherwise error, product not found. And so really straightforward delete, especially compared to that add edit. And let's delete our veggie taco that does not have ingredients, and it's gone. Let's delete our other veggie taco, and it's gone. Again, so a little bit more testing before we call this to an end. Let's add veggie taco one more time. Make sure our veggie taco is able to be edited. Looking good on the edit operation. It's kind of cool to see the many in take effect. So if I change an ingredient from plural to singular, our ingredients has been modified, but if I go back here, you can see that whether it's been selected or not, like here, it was plural, now it's singular, but you know, our many-to-many is in full effect. So we can add ingredients. Right, and now that we have ingredients, we can edit and add salsa to an ingredient. And our many-to-many is, yeah, everything is good. So I enjoyed making this. You know, there's a lot more to continue working on with identity and our ordering. We're actually going to make it now so that once you log in as a user, you can place an order. And so that's what's coming up next.